Liberation greetings to all and sundry. My name is Comrade John Akuro, and today is February 3, 2022. This is a special edition of The Soul of the Southern Cameroons. And in this edition, we are going to begin the retrospective season. This is an opportunity for us to begin looking at the year 2021. This looking back is essential because it will give us the opportunity to identify our areas of strength in 2021, the weaknesses that we observed, and when we are done doing this, we will move on to take a look into the future and cast what we need to do in 2022 to make this year different from 2021. To do that, I have with me in the studio a gentleman and a young woman. And let me begin with the lady. She's not new to this house or to this platform. She's been here before. Professor Liliana Tanga, greetings and welcome all the way from the Sunshine State of Florida.
Thank you, Comrade Jumba Akuro. It's a pleasure to be here again.
And then we have a gentleman who is from the most powerful state in the United States right now. He generally gets up and on a good weekend, he takes breakfast with the POTUS, with the President of the United States of America, and has fun. This is none other than Alem Alemanji, who is coming in all the way from Delaware. Hello, Alem.
Hello, Comrade John. Hello, Comrade Lillian. I'd like to say hello to our viewers as well, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. And thank you for having us here once again, John.
Thank you very much. Let's begin by casting a general view, an overall view on how we, as a people of the Southern Cameroons, who are stomping for the freedom of our country, for the liberation of our country, Ambazonia, how we fared in 2021. So, Professor Lem, I'll be finding out from you what are some of the key events in 2021 that caught your attention with respect to our liberation movement.
Um, Thank you, Comrade Akuro. We must remember before we delve into all of those that 2021 was a year that the world was still adapting to COVID, still struggling to live within COVID and all its restrictions. And physical mobility was a problem. So a lot of what was done in 2021, especially in the diaspora, was virtual. And we also noted in that 2021 that virtual realizations were a bit tricky and its results were not as effective as when people meet face to face. Notwithstanding, in 2021, the Southern Cameroonians did not give up on their quest for freedom. And that quest for freedom is beyond just the quest for independence. Independence is just a form of state, but freedom is actually what the average Southern Cameroonian, irrespective of whether they were federalists or unionists or independentists, were looking for. For a fact, every Southern Cameroonian feels that discrimination, those root causes that cause the discontent, is just the process of freeing themselves from these things that make them unhappy. That makes a difference between Southern Cameroonians. So, for one, they all realized that they had unity of purpose in what they are looking for as a people. And when I say a people, that identity that makes those individuals Southern Cameroonians rather than English speaking Cameroonians or Anglophone Cameroonians.
Mhm.
So we are looking at the ethnic Southern Cameroonians. Now, in 2021, we had several political civil society bodies with different ideologies, and the general discourse was that these people were disjointed, they were fragmented. But I will beg to differ from that discourse, because in whatever each of those people did, they maintained their quest for the analysis and a sustainable resolution of the root causes that are causing the armed conflict. So, within this talk here, we are going to those core things that we succeeded in doing at different stages, the diplomatic stage, the armed successes and failures. Of course, we don't want the armed conflict, so we wouldn't say any successes as something we're looking for. We want that resolved and done with, so we don't have to be losing our people. Killing people, we won't say it's a success. The success is if people don't die. So for now, I'll stop there and I will yield back to you.
Um, you delved into a lot of very interesting things there, and I noticed you started by, presenting excuses for the diaspora for not being able to, hold, street events. But Professor Lem, you notice that the world is beginning to recognize COVID-19 as a new normal, and as a result, people are still doing things. We're still seeing people around the world coming out. What is it that held Southern Cameroonians from also taking the opportunity to come out? Was it just a change of
I
strategy?
think I think Southern no, I wouldn't say a change of strategy. Earlier on in 2020, the Southern Cameroonians were still timid, especially those in the diaspora. But sometimes, like we say in our local parlance, you smoke out the rat mole from the hole, right?
Hmm.
Events in Cameroon itself, in Ground Zero, smoked out people. We saw Takumban coming out without planning in Boya when baby Caroline was murdered. We saw manifestations in the northwest when baby Brandon was murdered. In the diaspora, there were no such open wide manifestations, but there were face to face events later on in the year, like the ones held by the CDN in Toronto. So some events happened face to face. Southern Cameroonians did not stop pursuing their quest for freedom, but they did it in many disparate ways, both virtually and physically, face to face.
Comrade Alemanji, um, you are the chairman of the diaspora Ambazonian community. And what view do you cast on 2021? Was it an enviable year? Was it a year during which we made progress? Or was it a year of regrets?
Comrade John, I think this is a very good question, and it's one which, if I were to dive into details, we'll be here for a long time because I think that the quest for freedom by Southern Cameroonians met a couple of potholes and also met a couple of achievements. When you talk about 2021. Now, in terms of achievements, I think that one of the most important things that we probably achieved despite the COVID, right? And COVID had a role to play, like Prof just said. But I think that in if you look at it from a point of view of reverse psychology, you can say thank God that we had a COVID because it gave us some time to also to recalibrate and think about what it is that we're looking forward to when we talk about our revolution. One of the things that it made us do, and I think that we did maybe subconsciously, was to promote the fact that there's a problem in the Cameroons, right? If you look at some of the messages that were coming out towards the end of the year, especially I'm going to look at someone like Thibault Nash. Now, if you think about it, there's a lot of stuff that happened on Twitter from US, from British, and most other foreign nationals, which we didn't have before. So I want to think that in terms of progression, in terms of achievements, we were able to, I don't want to say educate because that's a tricky slope, but we were able to inform the world about the fact that there is a big issue. There is genocide that's actually going on in the Southern Cameroon. So I think from that perspective, there was a lot of progress that was made. And you can say that thanks to COVID because it allowed us to stay in our houses and to, using the technology before us to reach out to the world. And the whole world, since everybody was grounded, had no choice but to turn to social media. And we use that successfully in that perspective to able to educate the world as to what is going on in Southern Cameroons. Had it not been for COVID, we may not have been able to succeed the way we probably did. Now, that to me is the progressive part of it, right? In terms of regression, I would have to unfortunately come in-house. And I think that when you look at the struggle from when it started in 2016 or thereabout, the regressive part of it was uh, the degeneration, or let's say the collapse of our unity, right? We at the end by the end of 2021, I don't think that we were as united as we ought to be, or nor as we should have, as we were at the beginning. And there are a couple of things that you can put together and point fingers here, there, or everywhere. But I think that the most important thing is for us to come out learning from that experience. What went wrong? What have we learned from it, and how can we fix it? Right. But those are the two major things I think
So
that
exactly, I want to hold you on that. What is it that went wrong? What did we do wrong in 2021 that you think we need to work on now?
in 2021, and again, I think 2021 spills whatever we did that went wrong in 2021 spills from 2020 as well, right?
Yeah.
You look at the different, again, you look at the social media, for example. There was degeneration in unity because I want to say that some of us lost track or lost focus as to what it is that we wanted. And rather than focusing on our quest for freedom, we some of us started to focus on who will get us to that finish line. Some of us started to focus on titles and on uh, you know uh, on personnel and on people, rather than focusing on institutions and on the Southern Cameroon's quest as a people. That I think is where we went wrong. And we can sit here and point fingers and fault ourselves for what we care. But one of the bad things, and I say this with a straight face, one of the bad things that we learned from LRC is the idea of personalizing and putting people, respecting people for who they are in terms of titles, in terms of this and that. That's one of the issues. If you think about it, when you go down to Douala or Yaounde today, and you look at somebody's door, you go to the Ministry of Education, for example, you ask to talk to Mr. I don't remember who the minister's name is. People don't even know who the minister is. But you say Monsieur le Ministre, or you put a title before, yes, it's this particular person. Yes, it's that. And that I think is something that has trickled into the struggle, because now we're calling people presidents and we're calling people, and if you don't call somebody a president, he doesn't pick up his phone. These are little things that should not matter. Whether I call you president or not, the message I'm trying to give you has to do with the struggle. So pick up the damn phones. Excuse my French. But this is something that I have personally experienced, and this is just one example. Okay, now multiply that by what is actually happening in the struggle itself, and unfortunately, it's not only one particular set of individuals. It's something that's trickling down. But I personally think that to correct this, we have to go back to the drawing board. We have to go back to why are we in this in the first place? Like Prof just said, we are fighting for freedom. Freedom to me is really what we are looking for. Um, Again, like you said, whatever you could be an independentist, or you can be a what, freedom. Freedom is it. Everything else falls into place once you are free. I think Steve Biko said that before in South Africa too.
So,
If
Professor
I
Lem,
may.
I'm coming back to you. Yes, I know you want to chip in something, and let me ask this question so that you say it, and then you chip in what you are saying, and then get on to addressing this issue. How would you say the incidents relating to the brutal murder of Bebe Caro Louise in Boya, and then the taking out of Baby Brandy Tato in Bamenda? How would you say this incidents, factored or contributed in strengthening our resolve?
Okay. I don't know. The question is disjointed from my previous thought. I don't know where to start from. Um,
Just
but I
pick it
want to
from
go back
somewhere.
to what Mr. Allen was saying. 2020 was a year of confusion of the Southern Cameroonians. 2016 to 2019, they kind of knew what they wanted. 2020, individuality and egos
That's what I'm
got
looking for.
heightened. Yes. And people now suddenly found power where they never found power. If we take the Amber Boys, they suddenly found the power of the gun, to use the gun to kidnap, to violate basic human rights rather than fight for the purpose for which they intended for. If you find the leaders, especially the diasporic leaders, they suddenly found power and lost sight of the leadership of the people and focused on their being as powerful individuals, as presidents, as communication secretaries, as whatever you want to call them. So that individuality was very heightened in 2020. Group politics too was another thing that was heightened in 2020. You're either a GovC or you're IGK or you're IG Sako or you're ACT or you're whatever. That also was at its peak in 2020. The
We're talking of
third thing
2021.
that was a, I'm coming to 2021.
Okay.
They all have an impact on 2021. The third thing was, who is going to be the mediator? It was either we are for Swiss or we are not for Swiss, and that further fragmented the Southern Cameroonians. All of these things that were born in 2020 matured in 2021. So
Mhm.
2021 was a full grown maturity of individuals who have entrenched themselves as lords in the struggle. I don't want to call them warlords, I just want to say lords, or as groups that I say, oh, if you're not an AGOV-C or an IGK, then you are a no group. We even heard Chris and was saying, and these ones, who are even they? I don't know them. So it was like if you were not A, you were nothing. So if we're not for Swiss, then you are for Swiss. And these divisions became the biggest thing that fragmented the Southern Cameroonians and got them to lose track of what brought them into this crisis in the first place. But the good news is that towards the end of 2021, I'm talking of 2021, sorry, towards the end of 2021, they began realizing that it is not individuals, it is not groups, and it is not the mediator. It is the root problem and the solution to that root problem which gives us our freedom, which we are looking for. And I think the CDN was very instrumental in getting people to look beyond individuals, beyond groups, beyond mediators, to focusing on the problem, which is the Southern Cameroon's problem, which has been there for decades and degenerated into a war situation from the 2017s and the 2018s, and we are still experiencing it now. And it is this war situation that led to the killing of Bebe Carol Louise and Bebe Brandon, and which reminded us of why we are fighting in the first place, irrespective of whether we are AGOV-C or IGK or IG Sako or Chris Anu or whoever, including even you, John Akuro. The killing of those children touched us because those children did nothing wrong. They were not political. They didn't even know what was happening. They were still in the process of understanding there are guns, but why the guns are there, they were still struggling to grapple with. And those were the kinds of things that got the Southern Cameroonians to start complaining. Police brutality, disrespect of institutions, discrimination, bad educational systems, bad legal systems. Till today, have we heard of any legal procedures relating to the killing of these children? There will always be one kind of fact-finding mission by the government of Cameroon that never leads to anywhere. They don't even get punished. They'll go around picking those who are protesting and punish. They'll not protest those who commit the acts. So why are we losing sight of what our problem is and focusing on individuals and organizations and mediators? Let's focus on solving that problem. But 2022 is a very promising year, as we are going to see further in this program, because all those individuals and groups and even mediators have now begun to realize that we had deviated, and they are now trying to find a way of coming back together as a people with an acceptable leadership to seek for those solutions. Thank you.
Comrade Alem, you'll be having the last word on this first section of our discussion, which is bearing on the general mobilization in 2021. The question I want to put to you is this. In 2021, quite some people almost felt that everything was lost. Is that the feeling you had, getting off of 2021, Comrade Alem?
To be honest with you, Comrade John, towards the end of 2021, yes, I think that, of course, there those of us who had, background information and who are working behind the scenes, especially within our various groups and various communities. But if you look at the quest for freedom by the Southern Cameroons, there was a moment in time when it appeared to have stalled. And I think that when it became revitalized, right? I want to pick on maybe like one or two instances. There was of course, the death of baby Caroline, and that death was able to mobilize people in the dungeons. I'm talking about people on ground zero, whom we already thought was, life had gone back to normal. People came out to cry and to mourn for the death of that baby and subsequent other death as well. But you can see that, in the eyes of the struggle, that particular death reminded us, especially in the diaspora, that you know what, the struggle lives on, because our people back at home could care less about the fact that there were guns on the street, there were barrels, they came out. Now, there was another death, I think it was baby Brandy Tato, if I'm not mistaken, where, and if I'm wrong, please someone correct me, but the death where there was it was in a taxi, I think it was, and this woman came
That was
out.
Bebe Carol Luis.
That was Carol Lewis, right? Okay, good. Now, Comrades John and Comrade Lillian, tell me something, right? A woman comes out of a taxi, hmm, charges at a soldier, right? And consequently enables the death of that soldier who killed her baby. Again, let me repeat this. A woman, you killed somebody's child, a woman comes out of the taxi. I don't know if she was wearing a wrapper or something. As outrageous as she charges in front of the soldier with the gun, like charges at that particular person. And at the end of the day, that soldier loses his life. To me, that was, if not the peak, that was the turning point of the reawakening of the quest for freedom for Southern Cameroonians. And I asked myself the question, if this woman can look at the face of a barrel of a gun and charge at that particular soldier, what excuse do you and I have, or anybody else, when it comes to this quest? So to answer your question, yes, I think that during the year, especially with all the flaws that were going on, things were beginning to appear like lukewarm. But when these deaths came about and these events on ground zero, I had the feeling that ground zero has actually taken charge of this struggle, and rightfully so, because again, like I've always said, those of us in the diaspora can only help. I don't believe, and this is my personal opinion, I don't believe that the diaspora is capable of leading the struggle for various reasons. I believe that the diaspora is capable and well versed and positioned to assist, be it technically, be it financially, be it with education, be it with promotion, or to try to alert the world. We have the tools before us. We should be able to use what we have at hand. And I think that that's one thing that Southern Cameroonians probably have learned from 2021 or 2020 going into 2022, that we have now been able to get to the point where we know who does what best. We know that, for example, with the new CDN platform, we have a platform that we can actually use to come together to begin to even talk as different groups. That's a new thing, right? So we have learned. We know that, for example, if you look at financial, or you look at educative or technical or technology, DAC has proven itself in the past to be able to handle such things. We know that the consortium. So pretty much that's, I think, to me, in as much as it was a setback in 2021, it was also a chance for us to learn who is who in the struggle.
Thank you. You mentioned something that will
Right,
give us
John,
the opportunity to transit to the next section of the discussion. And
I think
in
you're
this next
muted.
section, we are going to be looking at the situation on the ground. I mean, in terms of ground action in 2021, what is it that was very remarkable? But what you said in your closing statement was like, you think, I mean, ground zero could lead. And that is a debate that is on the table right now, because with some moves on ground zero, with the various factions coming together, the various fighting groups coming together and trying to build some kind of synergy, like what we have seen in Bui, you have diaspora leadership feeling, frightened, feeling worried, and coming up with some thoughts that it could be like a coup, an attempt to, wrench total control from them and cut off. And then some even claim that if such were to happen, it could lead to, ground zero cutting off the diaspora and getting into some quasi kind of unacceptable negotiations with ground zero. Uh, Comrade Alem, I'll come back to you with this particular question. Is that something you also worry about?
You're muted.
Comrade Alem, I think you are muted. Don't figure out what's happening out there. Can you come again? Totally, sound has disappeared. Okay, Professor Lem, perhaps I bring you in while Comrade Alem tries to, see what's happening with his audio at that end. So, I mean, how do you address that dichotomy between ground zero and the diaspora? Because we're moving now to the situation on the ground.
While Comrade Allen believes that the ground zero could take over, I do not totally agree with him on that. For me, leadership from ground zero is heartily welcome for me because they have control and access to the real situation on the ground and have the population behind them. However, I do not believe that they can succeed without the diaspora because the diaspora also has its own contribution to the success. Given that the diaspora has resources that can contribute to helping the people on the ground succeed. Past revolutions in South Sudan, in Eritrea, in Bougainville have
You
shown
know,
the role of the diaspora in these revolutions. And truly, the leaders then were on their own ground zero. However, the situation in Cameroon is a little tricky and a little different and necessitates a collaboration, an adequate collaboration between the diaspora and the ground zero, rather than the diaspora having complete leadership, as has been the case in the past of situations on the ground, giving instructions without understanding the dynamics on the ground. I am opportune to have lived the conflict firsthand for several years before moving to the United States. And sometimes, when certain instructions are passed from the diaspora, I say these people are not realistic because they don't know what is happening. So, to me, there should be that collaboration between leaders from the ground and leaders from the diaspora, but people on the ground having that bigger role to play. But when we also say that leadership from the ground, we have to be realistic about the kind of um, environment we live in, with the government of Cameroon having a lot of power, which is very repressive and does not take into consideration human rights at all of people. It suffices for a soldier to be killed, for a whole neighborhood to be burned, and for women and children to be killed.
That's true.
So if we are to have a full-time leader on the ground, what logistics do we have to protect that leader to live long enough to leave the people to their freedom? Those are the challenges of having leadership on the ground. And reason why people tend to accuse people on the ground that they are La République, which is not necessarily the situation. I know genuine activists on the ground who have nothing to do with the Republic of Cameroon, who have been accused of conniving with the Republic of Cameroon. However, these activists also have to trade off something for their security and their freedom. So how can you actually be a revolutionary, the type we want to lead us to the kind of John Garangs to freedom, and successfully live in Cameroon? That is an equation that we need to work on to find a balance between leadership from the ground and leadership from the diaspora. There are challenges of, say, the armed leaders on the ground to participate in, for example, humanitarian training, international humanitarian law abroad. How would they move out of the country and go back? There is no security. So how do you want such a leadership to have all the capacity building to lead? Because you cannot lead completely without that capacity building.
Okay.
With the slightest, last thing, please, with the slightest opportunity of a virtual capacitation of these people, La République du Cameroon makes bandwidth of the internet weak, so that these people cannot have communication with those who can capacitate them. So there are all these challenges we need to navigate through. Thank you.
Yeah, Comrade Alem, I guess the hiccup is over, and now we can hear you again. Well, you just heard what Professor Lem talked about with respect to relations that could exist between Ground Zero and the diaspora. It's true that I actually have a different view when it comes to this. My point here is, in effect, Ground Zero, has a specific role to play, and the diaspora a specific role to play. What does this mean? It means Ground Zero, which is more of self-defense today, and then some kind of subtle resistance, the subtle resistance marked by the respect for ghost towns, lockdowns, and total disrespect of the established colonial administration. But that aspect of having leadership that can be, civilian, is what is completely, it's absolutely impossible. But creating a kind of chain of command among the various warring groups on the ground is fundamental in ensuring that these guys get self-organizing, pick people who can lead them because they know them and have a clear idea of their various realities and know who does what in what community, giving them the opportunity to reconcile themselves with the various communities. Professor Lum, you pointed out just a while ago that some, because there are few who perhaps were involved in that some gave themselves, the opportunity to use the weapons they have in their hands for the wrong reasons, using them in, say, kidnapping, terrorizing people around and all whatnot, while the good majority concentrated on trying to defend homeland. Now, this kind of situations would easily be addressed by the actors on the ground if they organize themselves and have the possibility to say, you stand here, you stand the other way, you stand that way, rather than having the diaspora deciding this for them. I think that is what more people are clamoring for, and not total leadership on the ground. If there's going to be total leadership on the ground, then it definitely will not be in the cities. It would be in the forest. I don't know whether that's what you think, Comrade Alem.
Yeah, I think partly I just took a white, what do you call it? Take a white paintbrush and just painted everything white in my sentence. Right. When I said that leadership from ground zero and the diaspora supporting, I think that's what I was actually leading towards. Um, the if you look, and again, our case is a unique case. Our case is a different case. But if you look at history, and you look at the other countries that have gone through similar situations, right? A lot of times the person or the iconic face of the revolution is somebody who's already on the ground for the most part. Now, when you explain the way you just did, Comrade Lilian, that you're right. You're right. There has to be some sort of a synergy between ground zero and the diaspora. I think what I was trying to kick back against, in terms of leadership, was having leadership coming from the diaspora. And why I was saying that is because of the current situation that we find ourselves in today, where you have about 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 different leaders, who are all claiming to be the leadership. So a way to, again, and it's not just my way or the highway, I'm thinking a way to eradicate that, so that, and again, we're learning from this, right? A way to eradicate such or prevent such from happening again is to actually have some sort of leadership coming from ground zero. Now, let me not try to reinvent the wheel. Let me just give you a hypothesis, right? Let's call this an experiment. Right now, we have, and again, this goes back to what I tried to say, that a lot of times Southern Cameroonians try to reinvent the wheel. We start something, it doesn't get completed. We just abolish that thing and we start a new one again. I don't blame us that much, because these are some of the bad habits we've learned from LRC. You start a building, you build this stuff, you build an airport. Tomorrow, you just say because it's collapsing, rather than maintain that airport and rather than fix it, what do? We let it crumble and we go and spend money and buy a new airport. We build a new group. Okay, we have right now in our prison cells what we refer to as the Naira 12. Sisuka Yutabe, Bata Sam Wilfred, and a whole bunch of other people who are there
Naira
now.
10, yes.
Naira 10, sorry. These, I'm trying to be politically and also factually correct in what I'm saying here, but these, once upon a time, if not today, were what people refer to as the leaders of this particular struggle. Again, I may stand corrected. Now, unfortunately, they got captured, they got put into life sentences, right? Now, does the fact that they are in prison make them less of a leader? And this is just a hypothetical question I'm asking, right? You know that Southern Cameroonians, if you think about it, how much energy and how much effort and how much time did Southern Cameroonians spend to be able to come up with a leadership, right? And we did come up with one, and unfortunately, they got arrested and they got thrown behind bars. So the question now becomes, what would be wrong? Because these are, if you look at it from the point of view of the international community, whenever they're referring to the Southern Cameroon struggle for freedom, and they talk about leadership, they always go back to those guys in jail, even though they may not necessarily be leading the struggle today, right? That is who the world has. Those are who the world has come to understand as the leaders of our struggle. That is who the world goes to come up with interviews and to prove a point. When Sesuko Itabe picks up his pen, even though he doesn't do that too often these days, and writes something or communicates something, you see that the world, including Southern Cameroonians, respond to it in a totally different way. Now, some may be negative, okay? And sometimes negativity is a good thing, but it's still publicity. Some people may say, oh, whatever it is, but when that man writes from jail or says something, his words carry some weight about it. And that weight, and I may stand corrected, surpasses the weight of any leader in the diaspora as of today, right? And let me say this again. When he writes or when he communicates from the jail cell he's at, the weight of his communication, I think that it's time for us to put facts and fiction aside and look at reality. And when we do that, our struggle shall be back on track, period. So back to my story or my hypothesis. I was saying that, okay, those are the people that the world knows. Right now, we're trying to go around and figure out, no, 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 no. What if we say, okay, you know what? Let us leave those guys as quote unquote the face of the revolution, so that we're not struggling for power punting here. No, that is the face of the revolution. We refer to them as quote unquote the leaders of the revolution. However, from the diaspora, and together with what Comrade John just said, you have a way to organize those guys on the ground so that they can actually have their own quote unquote synergy. Meanwhile, we in the diaspora support the movement with all the tools that we have at our disposal, which the people in the on ground zero and ground one do not have. Again, it's back to the idea of, like I said at the beginning of this uh, show, that we need to sit down and figure out who does what best and dedicate that task to that particular person. Southern Cameroonians are, if not the best, or if not the smartest, one of the top three smartest people in Africa. I think that's what I looked up not long ago. Now, yes, having an A in literature and math may not necessarily make you smart, but I know that we are the people, based on how we've been able to achieve our different how we've been able to be successful outside of that territory. We're all over the place. You look at Southern Cameroonians, they're successful in their particular fields, in medicine, lawyers, engineers, doctors. I want to believe that the average Southern Cameroonian, or let's say average and above, has not yet been fully engaged in this struggle. Otherwise, it will take a turn for the better.
Thank you very much, Comrade Alem. I think that takes us to yet the, I mean, a very important perspective in the struggle. So let us just a moment. Okay, great. So let us return to the basics. We are trying to establish a link between ground zero and the diaspora, perhaps to see exactly how a combination of these two, how a, a kind of rethinking of the relations between these two can make our collective quest for freedom stronger. But I'd like us to go back, first of all, to some of the things that happened on the ground in the course of 2021, and then we'll come out back in the projections. Do you, Professor Lem, have the feeling that the situation on the ground in 2021 emboldened our our quest for freedom? Did it speak well for us?
What got us in 2016 to rise up for a start has not changed. Unfortunately, so. With all the commissions and the special status, nothing has changed. What happened in 2021 simply reaffirms that we we are a people who are not free, who are not respected. However, the one thing that saddens me is that although we say 2021 people on the ground have a renewed sense of purpose, I want to remember a story told about a Russian president, I can't remember the name, who took a hen, I keep coming back to this, and was plucking off the feathers. It was really painful and it was crying.
That was Lenin.
When he finished, Lenin, yes,
Yes,
he
yep.
dropped the hen and then fed the hen with corn. And then everywhere he was going, the hen was coming after it. That's how I see our people on the ground. A lot of them are still calling themselves Cameroonian. They are still respecting the government of Cameroon. They are still wearing green, red, yellow, cheering behind the indomitable lions as we see and will see it. Suffer discrimination. It's simply because the people who would have taken them from the hands of that president who is plucking off their feathers have also failed them. So they would rather follow the person who was plucking off their feathers but throwing them corn than be where there will even be no corn. So what do we need to do? We need to, one, continue to educate our people on their rights as a people. It's because we've forgone our human rights as Southern Cameroonians. Our right to education, our right to health, our right to our ethnic identities, which include culture, language, and so on and so forth. These people can make do with having to forcefully speak French even when they don't understand it. So the diaspora needs to reclaim that thing, that freedom that they are enjoying in the diaspora, and teach that to the people on the ground. Not for them to fight the government of Cameroon, but for them to claim their freedom as a people and determine what they want to be as a people, whatever that thing is. If it is an independent state, let it be. I am unapologetic about this. But they need to know their rights. Because the problem now is, even when they are killing baby Caroline, we are still there and we are still condemning the struggle for freedom. Why are we condemning it? Because a lot of us in the diaspora have failed those in Cameroon. We don't understand what is happening, and therefore they've turned their backs on us. So we need to regenerate, redevelop that relationship, that harmony we had in 2017 and 2018. And as Comrade Allen says, it's because we've lost the face of the struggle. If
Now,
Sisiku were there, this will not happen.
Now, let me put this way, Comrade Alem. When I listen to this passionate appeal or this passionate expression from Professor Lem, it tells me that somewhere along the line, it's difficult for us to talk ground action without necessarily seeing how the diaspora or how the leadership issue factors into the whole thing. Now, you pointed out something, and that thing that you talked about is this, that we had a situation where, the leadership was captured in Nera, jailed, and because of that, we have found ourselves in the struggle orphaned, and then we've tried other options and faced some difficulties. Now, let me put it this way. I think what happens or what is happening today is the fact that somewhere along the line, we lost our bearings by doing just what we ought not to do. First, we did not have to come up with a government because the structure that brought Sisiku Ayuktabe to prominence and that brought him to power was almost like a structure of a government, but different from a government, not called a government. It was more unifying, more federating in nature. This structure was called the Governing Council. And the Governing Council had three arms of government. Three arms. You have the executive that was made up of the chairman of the Governing Council, the Secretary General of the Governing Council, and I skipped the vice chairman of the Governing Council. Besides this, you had the legislative arm, which was made up of what was called the Leadership Council, which was eventually changed. The name was changed to what today you are hearing them called the Restoration Council. It was actually called the Leadership Council. And now, this Leadership Council was complemented by another council called the Judicial Council. All of this made up what you call the Governing Council. And this Governing Council, therefore, is that body that brought together all the movements. All the movements today, the Consortium, the SCNC, Maurisk, the SCYL at the time, and then you have the Republic of Ambazonia, SCAPO, all of this made up what you call the Governing Council. So you had all these groupings. There was also the AGC. It was called Ambazonia Governing Council. It wasn't called the AGOVC then. And so all these groups, it's true that the AGC was still feet dragging. That was the only body that was still a bit feet dragging. But unanimously, all saw and somewhat recognized the governing council as the main body that brought all of us together. That is why we were able to score the successes that we scored in on the 22nd of September 2017, when you had millions of Southern Cameroonians coming out on the streets, both on the territory and across the world, because the call was from a unique body. Everyone felt concerned. All the activists were saying the same thing, and this cacophony was inexistent. So at that time, we were able, therefore, to strike the chord. But now, with the break to the creation of an interim government in a very contentious manner, is what brought us perhaps where we are today. And that's why, at the place where we are today, we have constantly been trying to go back to that thing that worked without success. Perhaps the cacophony we are seeing in one of the factions of that interim government today should remind us of the need to definitely reset and go back to that thing that worked. Comrade Alem, I don't know if you understand this perspective.
Um, let me you said a lot, so let me summarize what I was going to say initially, right? When Siseko Itabe was captured, interim government, or the first one, was created, correct, right? And you could tell that, like even in then I was in with Morris, and even in-house in Morris, we had made it clear that we were against such a creation of such a government. Our leader actually made it clear, Bo Herbert, that at that time, that if they're going to go ahead and create any government, he didn't want to be part of it. Mind you, this was at the conclave, at conclave 4. Now, as to what made them transform or push this into a government, I do not know. This is the kind of thing that you have to take a step back and say, listen, as a leader, there are certain things that you do not for your sake, but for the sake of your people, right? And I think that now there might be regrets, maybe a little bit too late, but there might be some regrets about it. And this is why I'm saying this. Automatically, when you have a movement of people who are fighting for freedom, automatically it's not even something you have to say or not say. There are certain things, sometimes it's what you don't say that has a lot of weight, right, in life. When you go ahead and you create a government, automatically you annihilate certain people. Because especially in our culture, we look at the Southern Cameroons or Africans in general. When you say a government, it means that you have a president, you have a secretary general or vice president or prime minister or whatever you want to call it. You have hierarchy. And the moment you put hierarchy in a struggle, it means that A is here and B is here. Once you start to do that, it means that A is expected to do this and B can only do this. And like I said, we don't own a country yet. We don't. This is the truth of the matter. So, and it goes back to what I said at the beginning of this show, that one of the paths that we have lost, one of the reasons why we've lost some momentum, is because there's a lot of emphasis on structures and what goes on in the structure, the president, the vice, this. I understand that when you have a group, you have to have some sense of organization, right? Or some sense of leadership, understood. But when you start talking about president, vice president, secretary of state, of what country? So are you telling me that the president of the United States of America will be able to welcome the presidents of Southern Cameroons? Are you telling me that that's possible? Because we have about 5 presidents. How can that happen? And this is part of our hindrance as well, because if you talk about a government, you need a host country to host that government. All of these governments, and let me use the term correctly, all of these IGs, can any of them prove that they have permission from any country outside of Southern Cameroon to be hosted? I want one of them, because remember, this is not the first time we have an IG. Professor, what's his name now? There was a professor. Shoot, I don't remember. A couple of years ago, the first IG, the first interim government was created years ago. I can't remember the professor's
I
name.
think Professor Carson Anyangwe had also been prime minister, if
Ambassador
I'm not
Fosso,
forgotten.
even Ambassador
Ambassador
Fosso.
Fossong too.
Yes, yes. Let's go back. Let's go. Let's not try and reinvent the wheel. Now, if you look at all, that's what I'm saying. All of these interim governments, which of them have the permits or have been granted host by any country? Because the moment you do that, then you say, okay, fine. I can then say, okay, we can respect you as a president of the interim government. But until that is done, and I don't want to give any of them publicity. I don't call names. But which of our presidents or which of the presidents of the IG can go and talk to any governmental representative of the United States as with that title? None of them can do that, because automatically by doing that, you're telling Cameroon, or you're telling the world that you recognize that particular person as president, and you have not even given them the permission to host their presidency or to host their government in your country. So from where I stand personally, we don't have an interim government. That's my personal point of view, until those particular requirements are met. Now, going to Southern Cameroonians in general, again, we have to go back to the educational or educative table, because our people need to be taught some of these things, right? There are people who are out there, and sad to say this, who are following people blindly, because those people either have access to the media, and sometimes you, John, you ask a question. Sometimes when you tell a lie enough, in the eyes of some people or the ears of some people, it becomes the truth. You know that, right? When you keep on hammering, as it's been done on some of these social media platforms, and you keep on doing certain things and say, oh, we have president this, president that, you go and give rice in Nigeria, instead of focusing on the rice that you're giving and the people that you're trying to serve, you're focusing on the banner of the person who gave the rice. Now, if you're an interim government, a lot of people contributed to that rice. Why am I only seeing one person's picture there? What exactly? And this is where we Southern Cameroonians, whom I believe or I thought were very smart for the most part, fall. This is the beginning. This is the fall, because certain times I ask myself, but we went to good institutions, some of the best schools. Even if you look at Cameroon as a whole, in the two Cameroons, some of the best schools on that territory were found in the northern and southern zone, to the point where francophones came from Yaounde and Douala, paid school fees 5 years in advance to put their children in those particular schools. How comes it that now that it's time for us to use that education, to use that smartness, to use what we learned? I know we came to the US, we came to Germany, we came to France, we even excelled in those particular institutions, great doctors and lawyers. But when it comes to common sense, politics, well, I think those two don't go together. But common sense about our own country, and we fall flat on our faces. There's a problem. There's a problem. And again, I think Prof had mentioned that, in one of our opening statements, education is, see, there's nothing worse than being uneducated. A lot of our people, we need to go back to the drawing board, unfortunately. I asked a question a while, and I'll give back the floor to you, John. When we had elections in the United States, where you have a system, we had a point in time when we had to pick between President Trump and Hillary Clinton. And the question I ask myself is that, wow, in close to 15 or 20 million people in this country who can lead this country, right? These are the two options that we're left with. But you know what? It's the way the system is, right? So what has to change to fix that is the system. At least it's a system over there. Are you telling me that when you look at Southern Cameroonians today and the Southern Cameroonians leadership, this is the best that Southern Cameroon has to offer? If the answer is yes, then maybe it's time for us to start thinking about packing our bags. I
Comrade
leave it at
Alem,
that.
I would like to say something here. Politics is funny. And Professor P.L.O. Lumumba puts it best than every other person. He says, in Africa, and of course we are from Africa, and I think it spans across the world, those who have ideas don't have power. And those who have power simply have no idea. So, if you're going from that perspective, I guess you understand exactly what I'm talking about. Now, our time is gone. We had to talk diplomacy, but I think, let's come off a bit from the idea, from the issue of diplomacy, or maybe we just crash on it very quickly, and then we end up with perspectives, because we had skipped to perspectives. I know, given the nature of our discussions, it's difficult not to get into perspectives. So, perhaps while we are still there, let me just ask this question: when you look at the cacophony that we have abroad right now, What is the way forward, Professor Lim?
Prof, I bet you that one first. Say that one first. Let me laugh about it.
I'll have to talk a lot of things to land on that. I'll go to leadership and then I'll go to the diplomacy. One of the things that we've lost sight, when I say we, I mean the leadership of the Southern Cameroons, is legitimation, validation, acceptability. Sometimes we live in the clouds of the social media of the virtual world and think that we have popularity, but those are just echo chambers. We need, for this thing to gain momentum and move forward, we need all the people to have a buy-in of what we are doing. And there is something I call the Toronto experiment, which worked. A lot of the people rejected, especially the new leaderships, I put it in plural, because they were essentially diasporic. And like Comrade Alem said, they didn't feel a part of that leadership because it was up there and dictatorial without the people participating in decision making and processes. The experiment showed that if you are to link with the civil society, the political society links with the civil society to solve the social and political problems, there is a buy-in of the different classes of people. From that is, I see the fact that the people on the ground cannot freely express their political will, but can freely express their social will. So the civil societies on ground zero thrive well because they can do that without repression. So why don't we tap into this civil society who can speak to the people on our behalf? And they tap on our political liberties that we have, and we work together. So I start. The government of Cameroon, from what we hear, only speaks with Sisiko, which is the IGK. Switzerland and the Swiss process are working with the Act, which is the IG Sako. But the Swiss process is epileptic. It's sick. It's suffering. Other governments say they don't have a face of the revolution. Recently, we heard Thibault Nagy in his different interviews and conversations with different groups, including the CDN, saying, if the State Department wants to speak to the leadership of the Southern Cameroons, to who are they speaking with? The State Department has received different kinds of leaderships coming in the name of the people of Southern Cameroons. If I receive this group today, I receive that group today, then there is no legitimacy, because if I have an engagement with this group, that group will reject it. So these are the problems we are having. And it brings back, Comrade Akuro, to your question. How do we do diplomacy with these different groups? Does having a governing council or a fifth conclave or a different platform solve the problem? And I think yes. Comrade Alem suggested that Sisiku is the face of the struggle. But we can also not pretend that there is a group of people that is against it. We were told that forget about the legitimacy of the Southern Cameroons in the 1950s and 60s and focus on the geopolitics rather than the legality. Legality doesn't do it. Its acceptability is the geopolitics, is the currency. That is what we should be dwelling on. So how do we, as a people, bring in the Sisiku face and the other leadership that are contesting for us to have common ground, common platform, and have these people who will speak for the Southern Cameroons? We are not asking for people to forget their different organizations and groups and political bodies, but for us to come together and delegate those who will be our spokespeople. These spokespeople are not the presidents or the chairpersons, they are simply the mouthpieces of the people of the Southern Cameroons. And I think the CDN is working with the different groups to see how they can come up with such a platform. I know there are conversations that are happening now because I think that the people have finally realized that alone they cannot win. Together we can go faster. And therefore,
Okay.
there is that need for us to work together.
Thank you, Professor
Comrade John,
Lem.
Comrade
Comrade
John,
Alem.
let me just piggyback.
Okay.
It's going to go exactly where she was going, right? Listen, a few months ago, the CDN hosted a fabulous retreat, and for lack of a better word, we'll call it retreat. We know why we're saying this in Toronto, Canada. Hmm? Now, that retreat brought together, I think, 15 or 20 plus groups. Now, this is something
Over
happening
30.
over 30 groups. Okay. Again, thanks for the correction. You are talking about Southern Cameroonians who sat down and said enough is enough, and are trying to provide all these groups with a platform where they can at least have some degree of synergy. John Barakuru, you've been talking about synergy a lot in your shows recently. Now, of course, it doesn't mean that every group has to come and agree to, to whatever, but at least the groups are talking among themselves. That is a very, very, very big accomplishment that happened in 2021, and that's, I believe, is going to spill into 2022. Now, granted, you know that even after that retreat, there were people that came out from different groups and organizations who were kicking back against the success of that retreat, to the point where not only did they kick back, but they kick back with lies. Now you ask yourself the question, okay, you who is sitting at home in your own virtual bubble and are saying lies about a group of people who have not asked you for a dime, but have tried to bring our people together. That should tell you a lot about the Southern Cameroonians, or some of them, that we have to deal with, right? And that's just one example. Okay, picture this right now. The progress that CDN has made so far, and again, that was just the first one, right? There are more to come, and there's a lot of discussion that's going on behind the scenes also to try and engage the other groups. Again, John, this answers your question of how do we go forward. The one thing that we have to realize is that no one group will do it alone. I think that we've learned that from 2021, right? So even if you look at the way that the groups have, the one thing that fuels these groups is money. And right now, it does not exist. The money is not flowing the way it used to flow. And that's also the reason why you're seeing people now coming back to what they call reality check. At the beginning of this revolution, 2017-18, there was no money. There was no money. There was ideology. There was the quest for freedom, and it came from the heart. It makes me think about certain things, and I don't want to call Cameroon again, but let me just use them as an example. When you had the Cameroon national team back in the 84 and 90s, the way they played football with the heart and the spirit. You had people who were playing not because of money. What, there was no money. They played because they had the flag. They were playing for the flag. They were playing for the nationality. They were playing for the people. Huh? You compare that team with the team of today, where it's all about, if I don't get paid, I don't go anywhere. That, I think, is the way we need to approach the struggle. We need to put the flag first, which means that I'm not saying that disbark or dismantle your group. Bring your group to the table, right? The CDN has offered this platform. What can you do to make that platform better? What can you do to take that platform and take the quest for freedom to the next level? Or again, like I said, each group at this point in time has their different strengths and weaknesses. How do we complement each other? To answer your question, John, how do we complement each other? We don't need to form new groups. We don't need to go and build new castles. How do we maintain what we have right now and tap into the strengths of the various groups to be able to take the struggle forward? Once you have done that, and you have, it's like a snowball effect. And guess what? Once you have that in the diaspora, automatically it's going to translate into those on ground zero and ground one. Automatically.
Comrade Alem, thank you very much. I want to say this. Let's try to go back to something that Professor Lem mentioned: the issue of the face of the struggle. I won't change the screen plan because I want all of us to be on the set as I talk about this. Look at this. When we came up with the governing council, it was a unifying body. We deviated. Conclave 4 came, created a confusion it created. We put in place a government against, expert advice. They told us once you create a government or you put in place a government, you have a number of problems. Number one, you need money to take care of that government. Of course, we're already seeing that some people are being paid salaries. In a revolution, that doesn't work. Number two, when you put in place a government, you find yourself with the difficulty of having where to host it. Of course, today we don't have a government because all of those structures ended up registering as non-governmental organizations, some as charity bodies and all whatnot, in order to exist, because you don't have where to host it. That came to pass. That weakness chased us. And then the next thing, if you form a government, you are going to be faced with having to face an opposition. Because wherever there's a government, there's opposition. And we've seen a lot of it. We've seen abundance of it. And again, the fourth thing was, when you form a government, you are going to create a difficulty with having to interact with other governments. Because state recognition follows a gradual process. If you transform into a government, no government will be willing to receive you. Because receiving you tantamounts to recognition. And because you are not yet a sovereign state, the sovereign state that you are struggling to, kick out of your territory still speaks for you. And they still have access everywhere. So they can diplomatically isolate you because you've transformed into a government. That is why we came up with a governing council. A governing council is only a council. So you notice that after we recognize, because no one in this movement will refuse or do recognize, after we recognize that failure, when this group of people were picked up, and of course, one thing you will note, why would Nigeria have been so incensed to the point of even violating the principle of non-refoulement? Because you come to Nigeria, you form a government without the agreement of the Nigerian government. Like people in Cameroon simply blackmails them by saying you gave your approval for the formation of a government in your country. That means you have recognized and you are trying to destabilize us. So it leads to some of those things. I don't want to get so much into that. So you see, it created an opposition. It created a lot of confusion. Today, we have seen how this government is fragmenting. I heard Christian, just before we came to this broadcast, announcing the imminent announcement of a new leader by the close of today, the 3rd of February, a new leader. And Sako hasn't given up yet. So you look at this, again, that is, another level of fragmentation. That is why, in efforts to look for solutions, we started with the Washington Collaborative Conference. It didn't work. We went to the SCLC, the Southern Cameroons Liberation Council. Again, a council, it didn't work. Listen, why would it make sense to fall around Sisiku Julius Ayuktabe? Like him, hate him, I would say it from morning till evening. I simply see him as another Southern Cameroonian, as stormed for his election in Canaan land at the 3rd conclave, as chairman of the governing council. To this date, I still recognize him as such because I have never recognized the existence of an interim government. And I'll say this, if we want to go back to where at some point we were unanimous about something, we were unanimous about Ayuktabe's leadership under the aegis of the governing council. So can we take a step, if we stop, and then take one step back, return to the notion of the council that worked? And you have him there, therefore, as a chairman of that council, not that he's actually presiding, just as a face. And like Professor Lilian said, we now have people who are free out there running the affairs of this council. When we are able to get La République du Cameroun out of our territory, there is going to be a transitional authority that will prepare the grounds for at least 3 to 5 years, and we will have the first democratic elections to elect our first president. Because what is killing us is some people are having in their heads that notion that they will just be abroad as interim president or whatever, and then When we get independence, they simply ride on high horses like Jesus entered Jerusalem and get into Southern Cameroons and get installed as presidents and start giving people, those who are appointed here positions, those already calling themselves secretaries or whatever. If you get this out of your head, because it's a pipe dream, if you get this out of your head, we will begin to make progress. And I think the voices on the bushes on ground zero, to quote Atanga Ponji, have understood this. That's why they are coming together. And that's why it is important for us to recognize the need to come together. So if, as Professor Lum says, and you, Alem, also corroborate, there is need for a fifth conclave, and if we eventually have to hold a fifth conclave, the thing to do will be trying to should be to come together with this synergy. Press on the reset button. Go back to where it worked. Take it from there. Of course, we don't have to like Ohetisi Julius Ayuktabe. He is the last leader that was elected by all our movements, with the exception of very few, in a duly constituted conclave and recognized by all. So rather than reinventing the wheel, we'll simply put in place a council and say, okay, he was the chairman of that council. Now he's in prison. We run the affairs of the movement. Release them, release them, release them, and we continue until we get there. I don't know. We have been so long on this program, and not to keep our people on so long, we'll definitely have another opportunity to come back and talk diplomacy and talk other issues. So, Professor Lem, your final word on this program before we go? For some reason, I can't get you, Professor Lem.
She's muted.
Thank you.
There
Okay,
you go.
awesome.
I think, Comrade Akuro, you said it all. We can fight as much as we want on the ground. If we do not also engage diplomatically, we will not go anywhere. Because this conflict has a vital geopolitical aspect to it which cannot be ignored. We need to take this conversation away from us to out there, to the different governments, to the different international organizations that can push things to work faster for us. But for us to do this, we must have a unified leadership. Unified, not that we single out one person and say this is the leader, but have people who are delegated to speak diplomatically for the people of Southern Cameroons. The Swiss process is failing or is not succeeding, let me put it positively, because we do not have those people we all agree should be speaking for us. If any other process comes and we still do not have a common front, an acceptable group of people delegated by the people of Southern Cameroons, not AGOVC, not IG, then we are wasting our time. So we are hoping that this 2022, we are coming out with that group of people who will be the mouthpieces of the people of Southern Cameroons, acceptable by us. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Lem. Comrade Alem?
Um, Thank you, Comrade John, for having us on this show. Professor Lillian, thank you for again. I apologize for the late start. I know I had a small role to play with that. Followed by Comrade John, of course. My people, Southern Cameroonians, this message actually goes out to you directly. The ball is in your court. We've spoken now for about an hour plus. One of the good things, and I don't want to put again, God has a way of doing things. I think that in as much as there was an issue creating a government, I think that the positive energy that comes out of that is that we have realized the people that we should not trust and the people that can take us in an opposite direction from where we want to go. And we have realized those who come in good faith. I think some of these groups, or most of them, because of the turmoil that we've been through, we as Southern Cameroonians have been able to to see through some of the smoke and realize the people that we work with, the people that we deal with. Had it been that Sisiko Ayutabe had just taken us through the whole thing and gone into independence, I think we would have had a turmoil because everything would have just gone so gracefully and we don't even know, who the sheep and who the goat are. But we've gone through the 2021 and 2020 for a reason. I want to believe that it's God's way of telling us that, to understand who we are better, understand those of us who can trust and those who cannot trust. Having said that, to we do need a reset. Now, whether that means having another conclave, whether that means going back to what we had that worked, either way, I think we can all agree that what we've done for the past 2 or 3 years has not necessarily worked. But we have learned from that. We have actually learned from that. And I want to say this especially to the boys on ground zero. Again, you are on the ground, you are on the soil, you are the ones who are planting granuts, you are the ones who are doing what you want to do, what you have to do to survive. Put your survival first. There are people here in the diaspora who will mislead you. Common sense should be their guidance. Common sense should be your guidance. If somebody is telling you to do something that you naturally know is not correct, say no to it. Put the flag first. Is this going to be beneficial to Southern Cameroons? Not to Bali, not to Libya, not to, no, that has its own place. Whatever you have been tasked or asked to do, is that going to be beneficial to the Southern Cameroon? If the answer is yes, don't think twice about it, do it. If you have doubts about it, sit down and think about it again. And I'll leave it like that.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Professor Lem. Thank you, Comrade Alem. You brought in, some very important insights into our collective quest for freedom, into our struggle for freedom. And I'd like to thank all of you back home, wherever you are, who took time off your very busy schedule to watch this program. I promise that we will be back here, and when we come back, we will be discussing very much more about the perspectives, the way forward, what we need to do as a people to secure our freedom, what we need to do as a people to ensure that we make our trip to freedom land, as seamless as possible. I've heard a lot of talk about fifth conclave, whatever kind of gathering, but people, we definitely must not just sit and do nothing. There is some important thing we need to do, and we all have to do it as a people if we must ensure that our suffering does not go in vain. We are seeing what is happening in Mali, what is happening in Guinea, what's happened, that's Guinea-Bissau, what happened in Guinea-Conakry, what's happening in Burkina Faso. My people, let us continue to be resilient. We must continue to be strong. We must continue to believe in our own struggle. And I'm convinced that we will get there. Until we meet again on this program, the soul of the Southern Cameroons, it's have a nice time.